The lights are off and away they go.
Extremely loose. He's managed to hold on and they get.
He missed the complete. That is crazy stuff.
Side Freitas is on the grass on the infield floor. He slides through. He tags Richard Eck.
Welcome to Rockingham Speedway, home of Round 4 in the Northwest Majors, and you're watching it live on the Global Sim Racing Channel. I'm Joe Peak. With me in the booth today are Brian Corwin and Samuel Ryman. Also behind the scenes is our director Kevin Brown, ready to bring you all the action on track. Colloquially known as The Rock, Rockingham delivers a daunting challenge for even the best drivers. To tell us a little bit more about this uniquely shaped tracks, let's go to Brian.
Well, first of all, this is one of the most historic tracks in all of NASCAR history. The track itself is 1.017 miles, or 1.636 kilometers. It's a typical D-shaped NASCAR series, and it has 4 corners. And today we'll be racing 200 laps, Joe.
So it's going to be a long while for these guys out on track for them to have to be competing, so they need to think about the long term. And speaking of the long term, what is the overall championship starting to shape up like, Sam?
Well, very close at the top, so these guys need to consider the fact when they're out there racing that really every point lost is a big chunk of positions potentially in the championship standings. So let's run down the top 5 for you. It's Toby Butler in the points lead with 50 points from his win in the Daytona 500. Ryan Otis, who has scored points on the oval and roadside, is sitting just 4 points back of Toby. Mark Rediker, Stephen Ellis and Brian Pager round out the top 5, 7, 8 and 9 points back of Toby Butler respectively. So still very close after 3 rounds, Joe, but that could all change today.
Absolutely. And if you're not familiar with the Northwest Majors, these guys race on both oval and road circuits and in all different types of cars. So they have split up the championships to consider that as well. And Brian, what's the oval championship looking like?
Well, Joe, right now leading the Oval Championship is Toby Butler with 50 points. Following close behind, trailing by 9 points, we got Brian Pager. He's in second place. Mark Rediker has 35 points. He's trailing by a margin of 15 points. Rod Flagg, he has 30 points. He's trailing by 20. And then to round off the top 5, we had Josh Gardner with 25 points, trailing behind by 25 points as well. Joe?
And then, obviously, on the road side, Stephen Ellis is leading at 42 points. Meanwhile, Ryan Worley is sitting in second, only 4 points back at 38. Then David Warner is at 37 points. Ryan Toma is in fourth at 35 points. And then Ryan Otis is sitting fifth with 31 points. There's a few things to talk about, but first of all, I want to wish both of you guys a happy Easter. Thanks for coming out and commentating with me tonight.
Not a problem, Joe. Always glad to help out when we can, and happy Easter to you as well.
Gonna run a mile around the block to burn off all the success chocolate as soon as the race is over.
For me, it was potatoes and cheese mostly and some barbecue. But let's get back to this track. As we mentioned, guys, this is a bit of a uniquely shaped D-oval with that kink on the front stretch. And I know you were talking a little bit about some of the drivers might be having a little bit trouble with that, Brian, depending on how their car's set up.
Yeah, that is very true, Joe. Depending on the build, I haven't run this track in a few seasons. It's kind of being cycled out as one of the more frequently used tracks here on iRacing.com. However, I have lots of experience here in the truck, and I do know that the truck happens to be a little top heavy at times. Unless these guys tuned out their springs and their ride heights just right, the truck is very easily becomes loose going into turn 4 and exiting into the tri-oval. And I think that will be one of the key factors in today's race. How long can these guys go on their tires before they get too loose and can no longer hold on going into the tri-oval?
And it's also worth noting with the trickiness of that exit, if they do run into trouble, Sam, they are going to have 2 fast repairs. Now, for those not familiar with iRacing, what exactly does that mean?
It means that if you get damage on your car, now that could be anything. That could be scraping the wall, or it could be your car completely being totaled after a rollover on the backstretch. If you damage your car, you can come to pit road and get it repaired via a tow or via limping your way around the circuit, depending on how badly your car's damaged. And you get 2 free repairs in the pits, meaning your car's fixed immediately, you get back out there. Problem is, after those 2 repairs are done, you're on your own, kid. But, and, you know, I think that's going to cause a little bit of trouble here at Rockingham, because it's very easy to scrape a wall, and there could be a chance that a driver will go out there, scrape a wall on 2 runs, come in, pit twice, and all of a sudden his 3 repairs are gone, and he may not even know it.
Exactly. So they're going to have to be quite careful as they're out there and pay attention to that and know, you know, once they're gone, how safely they need to drive. So as we're watching the qualifying, we're going to let them go on a little bit longer before we read that out as guys are putting their 2 laps in and putting down laps. 2 wide racing is possible here. It's got very steep banking here at this relatively short oval. So I expect that we'll see at least fairly close racing for these guys on trying to compete for position.
Yeah, you know, Joe, this is something that has always been debated on iRacing as far as the oval racing goes. And the debate itself is about, is it a 2-groove racetrack or not? And everyone argues that this is not, in fact, a 2-groove racetrack. There is no 2-groove racetracks on iRacing, but I tend to disagree with that. I've raced here enough times in the Gen 6 and the B-Class car to know if your car's set up the right way, you can run the outside lane or the inside lane all the way around the track just fine. And if you're managing your throttle and you're spacing with the other cars, you should have no problem running side by side. However, with that being said, it takes a very special group of drivers to be able to run those lines consistently, and I would definitely say that single file is definitely a preferred approach for this track.
So going on top of that, Brian, I'm kind of wondering if it's more a matter of knowing who you're driving with and who can you trust.
Yeah, you know, Joe, that's something I've put a lot of thought into on my time in iRacing. When you run the public official servers, you typically run with people that are close to your iRating or in the same skill bracket as you, and you don't really know the person you're driving. But when you're running with a group like the Northwest Majors or any of the other leagues, you get to really know the type of person that you're racing against, and you know their tendencies and what makes them tick. And we even saw that in the MX-5 World Tour the other day. We saw drivers giving a lot of respect of their spacing, and I bet these guys are starting to know each other better and experience the same kind of things. How close can I run with this guy before we need to think about backing off, Joe? And that is something I think on the track definitely need to think about as well.
Very much so, and I'm sure we'll see who is comfortable around who around here. I know we've already seen another oval race at Daytona in this series, so we've gotten a feel for how these guys are. And I mean, this is a mix of different kind of drivers. There are some oval guys in this club. There's some road guys. There's some who do both. And obviously, the ones that can master each of those disciplines are the ones that are going to start to rise to the top of that points championship. So qualifying is starting to fill out, and I think we're getting close to everybody having their laps in. I see that we've got 16 drivers having put in the laps. We've got about 4 minutes to go, so let's wait maybe 2 more minutes before we read off in case anybody is waiting just a little bit longer. We should have time, and everybody should have a lap ins in case we miss anybody sneaking one in towards the end. So as we watch this, we see the qualifying, and we've watched a little bit of practice. Sam, who's your pick for today?
Well, currently on top of the timing charts is Drew Lalonde, and I was watching him out there doing his qualifying run, and his car was hooked up. Ryan and I, in fact, even right before we began broadcasting, were debating about what line we thought was preferred. Was it preferable to have a truck that was a little bit on the free side and, you know, use the speed to get up front? Or was it preferable to have a truck that's on the tight side, diamond the turns, make it to the finish without any incidents? But really, Drew Lalonde out there doing his qualifying run, he just seemed to have that car on rails. So I'm going to go a bit with the obvious, I'm afraid, and pick Drew for this win.
And Brian, who's got your eye?
Well, Joe, it's going to be whoever has the most money in their wallet, because being a villain, I haven't really got a chance to get to know the drivers and see what they can do. However, like Sam just said, Drew Lalonde, he was on rails through practice, and I think he looks like a veteran driver. I could just tell by the way he puts his car on the track and gets around. However, because I don't know the drivers, I'm not going to commit to one. I'm just going to enjoy the race, Joe.
Well, I think I've got my eye on Toby Butler, currently sitting third and leading the points championship overall and in oval. So he's sitting pretty nicely at the moment, and I think he might be one to watch today. But let's go through the qualifying times because I think everybody has got their lap in at this point. We've got a few minutes left. So Drew Lalonde, as you mentioned, sitting on pole at a 23.2, a whole tenth and a half ahead of the next guy up. And in oval racing, a tenth and a half is quite a gap. William Fletcher is completing the front row in second. Toby Butler is sitting in third. Then on the outside of the second row in fourth, it's Brian Pager. In fifth, we have Brian Barnes. Then sixth is Mark Redeker. Ray Fournier is in seventh. Carl Burke is sitting in eighth. Then ninth is Jared Morgan. And 10th is Skip Worthington, Brian.
Taking over at 11th, we have Joshua Gardner. And 12th, we have Lawrence Danton. And 13th, we got Mike Ouellette. And 14th, we have Virgin Markheim. And then 15th, we have Stephen Paulson. And then 16th, we have Randy Webster. And that rounds off the standings there, Joe.
So not a terribly huge field today, but should still be some good racing around here. And I believe that is actually Mike Ouellette. He is the league organizer, and he does a lot to put this thing on. And this is a very interesting championship, one of the more unique championships that we broadcast here at GSRC, and it usually has a good show. We've got just about a minute left of qualifying to tick down just in case somebody decides they want to show up at the last second and try to put some laps in here. So we're going to give them just a little bit of time. But I am pretty excited for this because I have to admit, guys, that I am not as familiar with this track. I mean, I did a lot of racing on it in some older sims back in NASCAR Racing 2 way back in the day in the mid-90s. But my exposure to it in recent times is a bit limited. So I'm excited to see what kind of show it puts on today.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show for sure, Joe. And speaking back to NASCAR too, this track was always the one track that I remember my dad and my uncle always came here and raced just for the fun of it because, like you said earlier on, the banks are huge here. And this is one of the most oddly shaped tracks there is. I mean, you got the long sweeping turns 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, but that back wall just kind of sneaks up on you. So very challenging track. It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right, we are now gridding up as the pace car is sitting on the start-finish line, and guys are bringing their cars to the grid. And I can see that Scott Hutchinson is qualified 17th with no time, but I believe he is not in the server. So Scott Hutchinson should be a DNS, did not start for today as far as I know. So we're getting ready to see these guys take off and give us a show here today. And should be, I believe, a single pace lap. Is that correct, Sam?
I'm not entirely sure, honestly. Yeah, no, it does look like it's just going to be a 16-car race. And I want to point out, Joe, that there's 1.5 seconds separating this whole field. So we were talking about the how well these drivers know each other and how that could play into effect today. We've also got to consider the fact of how diverse this field is. Some cars like Drew Lalonde's looked absolutely hooked up, whereas a couple of other drivers at the back are struggling just to find a line around this place. And, you know, there's certainly lap traffic could come into play if we get a longer green flag run here today. Very possible considering the race is 200 laps long. And so it could be, hopefully it doesn't get ugly when they come in lap cars, but certainly something that we're going to have to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and I mean, I really hope that any of the lap cars are going to be respectful and if they come upon, or if the leaders come upon them, rather, and are putting them a lap down, especially during a battle, to be able to just get out of the way. We were doing a race a little bit earlier today where we saw that partially come into play towards the end at Richmond in the Piston Cup, and thankfully that driver that was a lap down was able to try and get out of the way in time. He kept his eye on his little F3 box, is what we call it here in iRacing, because you press the F3 button and you got a little HUD box up that shows you where everybody is around you in terms of timing. So these drivers who are at least towards the back of the pack will definitely have to keep their eyes on that and check and see where the leaders are if they are coming up on them. Pace car is leading them around 3 and 4 now, so Drew Lalonde is going to take them away. So let's see if we get the pace car in this time by as he comes up to the pit entry. Now coming off of 4. There he dives away, so we are going green this time by. Green flag waves, and Drew Lalonde leaves them away with a good jump. William Fletcher is nowhere to be seen, and Toby Butler already up into second.
Yeah, that outside line with the 28 car of William Fletcher looked like he got a little bit of a bobble there. I don't know if he was not too sure about how his start was going to go, but unfortunately he lost a lot of time stopping everyone behind him. Everyone tucks in single file, though, and we have a clean first lap so far, Joe.
Yeah, look at Drew Lalonde absolutely extend that lead. Already 1 lap in. That is a significant gap between himself and the rest. Over half a second already. Very significant. Now, William Fletcher dropping back. One thing I noticed earlier in today's race, or earlier today in the race at Richmond, that outside line was really at a disadvantage on the double file restarts. Do you think that's going to be an issue today, Brian?
Yeah, you know, it's hard to say because, like I said, it's been a while since I've actually run here in the truck, but knowing the truck and how easy it is to spin those tires on the start, I think the outside line will be at a slight disadvantage, especially if we see people in the very front of the pack making mistakes.
And we just got word that Vernon has started in the pits, and he will be lapped soon. So things are starting to develop, but Drew is definitely not taking off as quick as we thought. Because, Sam, it looks like Toby Butler is at least keeping him in check. In fact, he shaved about a 10th off that time around.
I was a little skeptical about Toby Butler because you say he won at Daytona. Yes, Daytona is an entirely different circuit than what we're used to seeing at Rockingham. This is more of a racer's track, more of a road course track. You have to use the brake, you have to use throttle control. Daytona, you just hold it wide open. But yeah, like you were mentioning, Joe, Vernon Markheim started from pit road, obviously, to try and stay out of any lap 1 incidents, which fortunately we didn't see. And the leaders are going to be lapping him soon, so that could spice things up already.
I'm guessing that is not the sort of strategical start that he was hoping for. I guess that's a gamble he was willing to take, and it's not paying off right now. He is losing time hand over fist. And Brian, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I know you wanted a bit of a Darrell Waltrip start for me, but I just don't do Darrell Waltrip.
It's all right, Joe. It's all in the spirit of oval racing. I come from an oval racing background, and I'm just happy to be here and watching these trucks power around Rockingham.
So a lot of guys already slipping into single file, not a lot of side-by-side that I'm seeing around here at the moment. Although Brian Pager, looking on the inside of Brian Barnes, he's got a good run heading up into 1, but he's not close enough to stick it in there yet.
Yeah, it looks like Drew Lalonde's to be the first to tuck under the 33 of Vernon Markheim. He makes a clean pass, so it looks like Vernon's going to be polite and just stay out of everyone's way the best of his possibility. Right now we got Toby Butler and also William Fletcher coming through as it looks like we're going to drift up and kind of go single file there. Everyone gets through nice and clean, though. This is the type of race we'd love to see.
Caution on the speedway.
Let's see if we can figure out what exactly happened.
Joshua Gardner, he was having issues in practice, Joe. He had a very loose truck, was struggling to find out a line. Looks like he may have had a wreck on the backstretch.
I was going to say, I think we're going to see a replay, and we seem to have some issues, so we apologize. Apparently our replay does not seem to be working right now. We'll see if we can get that sorted out for you later. But for those who are wondering, as was mentioned, Josh Gardner just seemed to kind of get a little bit loose and banged it up against that wall on the exit of 2. Now, Sam, you and Brian were talking a little bit about that exit, how it's rather tricky for some guys.
Yeah, well, what Joshua Gardner's been doing as we watch the leaders come down pit road right here is he's been running a very low line through turns 1 and 2. And Brian and I were in agreement that we don't quite think that's the preferred line because the lower you run in the corner, the more your car pushes up on exit a little bit, and that can get you in a turn 2 wall. And I have a feeling that's what happened to him. However, he will get one of his 3 repairs here, so he should still be in contention. Also, obviously, Vernon has got the wave around, so all back on the lead lap. My question right now is who's going to come off pit road first? Drew Lalonde came in first.
Yeah, I was kind of keeping my eye on that, and it's definitely going to be Drew Lalonde as he gets out before anybody has dropped off the jacks. Toby Butler is going to get second, and I believe I just saw Vernon get his lap back, although, no, I think, he didn't quite get past Drew. Oh, just a second or more, and I think he might have had that.
He's got his lap back, Joe. He took a wave around the pace car. He's going to have to come in and pit because he was a lap down when the caution came out. So he is going to be on the lead lap, but he won't be starting anywhere near the front.
Ah, there we go. Okay, I was hoping he was going to be able to get that back, which, would definitely help him. And before that yellow flag came out, we understand that Redeker was making up a few spots. As we said, Vernon now hopping into the pits himself now that everybody else is taken theirs. But Jared Morgan decided not to pit, apparently, and is up in front of Drew and Toby and William at the moment. So he's going to lead away. Now, we haven't talked about pit strategy, guys. And what kind of length can these guys expect on a stint?
Well, Joe, it's really up to the driver and how well they can conserve their tires. With Jared Morgan right now, I'm actually pretty impressed with his idea because we're only 10 laps in. That means the tires haven't really gotten a chance to wear down completely yet. Now, typically, like we were talking about with Sam before the race, these guys tend to burn up their tires pretty quick at a track like the Rock. That goes without saying with the way the banks are and how slippery the trucks are. But because it's so early in the race and so early in the stint, Jared hasn't had a chance to ruin his tires yet, and he just he knows that it's very hard to be passed here, and he might try to wait for another yellow, which will give him a chance to get a fresh start and be up in the front of the pack. Joe.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, with so many guys coming down pit lane, we were only, less than 10 laps into this long race with 200 laps to go. That's very early. I mean, I know everybody obviously wants to employ strategy and try to work their way through, and I think they're actually getting ready to go green this time by as they start to double file up down the backstretch here. But I'm kind of with you. I think maybe Jared was onto something, but we'll see here how track position comes into play, because we haven't really seen a whole lot of dicing yet, so we don't know how easy it's going to be for these guys to try to get by somebody who's at a slower pace than them.
Jared started 9th, and his fastest lap times in practice and qualifying were 23.9s. He's been running 24 zeros this race. The 7 cars right behind him have been a couple tenths quicker than that. So, Jared's really going to have his work cut out for him if he wants to hang on up here. But that clean air can do worlds of wonders, Joe.
We'll find out what the clean air is going to do for him real quick as we take the green flag now, and Jared is very late off the start. In fact, he doesn't get too terribly good of a run. Drew Lalonde, though, in a bad position in that second spot, trying to hold on around the outside, and it looks like Toby Butler is going to slot himself up into second.
Jared Morgan on those worn-in tires, he looks like he had a pretty good start. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with oval racing, potentially, coming out of turn 4 right before the pace car leaves, they have an acceleration zone where they could choose to pit. That's why we saw the late start. And what he did was he took everybody off guard, which gave him a little bit of run going into turn 1. So very smart move by Jared Morgan now, as he has quite the gap in oval terms here in the lead.
Yeah, he's put about half a second between himself and Toby, and what a move by Toby to try and slip underneath there. In fact, Brian Barnes has also gotten past Drew Lalonde, so Drew not doing so hot on this restart, but there's a long race to go. I'm sure this all just comes into play with any of these oval guys that know when you have a race of a certain length, sometimes you just got to give and take.
And Toby Butler has gotten a run off of turn 2, and he's going to look down the inside of Jared on turn 3 now, and Jared's just going to give it to him. Unfortunately, he may lose 2. Oh, as the number 4 truck slips up there. 2, maybe even 3 spots right now. Jared's going to start falling back. Plan worked for about 2 or 3 laps, Joe, so maybe if there's a green-white checkered at the end, staying out will be the way to go.
Absolutely. Brian Barnes obviously now up into second, with Jared Morgan slipping all the way back to 4th and now down to 5th as William Fletcher is getting by him. Yeah, this is really looking like worn tires are not what these guys want. In fact, he's dropping another spot
Battle
now.
For the lead. Battle for the lead. Look at this. Brian Barnes sticking his nose under Toby.
Looks like he's going to get him.
They're still side by side going down into turn 3, Joe.
And I have to apologize. I'm having some issues with my iRacing simulator. I will try to get back on that.
Well, while we go through here, we have Brian Barnes. He takes the lead as we come back into the tri-oval. He's going to lead the pack around turn 1 as it's like a pack of buffaloes behind him as the number 8 of Toby Butler peers in. He has quite the run, but he will not have enough to get him as they come out. But turn 2, Barnes just barely missing that outside wall. Now that everyone's getting back to single file, they're going to hopefully now settle down just enough that they can get enough of a spacing to go and have another long green stint. Back to you, Sam.
Brian Barnes is a driver we really didn't talk a whole lot before the broadcast began. He qualified 5th and he's really just picked them off one by one. I was paying attention to the race going on behind Jared Morgan on the restart there, trying to see who would emerge in second and take the lead when it all came. And obviously the fact was that it was Toby Butler who was looking good for a while. But yeah, Brian Barnes has just came alive, Brian.
Well, you know, what I've noticed in oval racing over the years is it's not always the fastest qualifier that gets the lead, and right now Brian Barnes is starting to look like one of those guys that have been a veteran here in iRacing. So with that being said, I think he might be using a tactic where he's just going to try and intimidate his way to the front, and that is what we're seeing today. And well, the good thing about intimidating drivers is it's very hard to get them to budge. So if you're going to see anybody passing Brian Barnes, it's because Brian Barnes made a mistake, Sam.
And he almost made a mistake off of turn 2 last lap. He got very, very close to that wall, sliding up. And that kind of bunched the cars up behind him, about a 4-car lead pack here. And riding in 5th place, Carl Burke, who we haven't mentioned this race, is not too far behind. But this race is beginning to have a bit of a green flag feel to it, as we're on lap 21 now, Brian.
Yeah. For all those watching back at home, we need to apologize. It looks like our host Joe Peak is having an issue with his simulator. He's going to reboot his computer and come right back. But for right now, we're looking at Drew Lalonde as he has quite the run on Toby Butler, and Brian Barnes is getting even more outside. Every time he comes out of the tri-oval, it seems like he's drifting up the track a little more. So it makes you wonder if he's overdriving those tires a little bit. But right now, the veterans Toby Butler and Drew Lalonde are now putting the pressure back on the Brian Barnes, and we are seeing quite the race here at the Rock.
Yeah, and you saw, unfortunately, the number 131 car of Joshua Gardner going back down pit road with damage again. He has a lot of damage on the rear of that car, but we'll continue to watch this battle for the lead right now. And I'm beginning to agree with you, Brian. I'm almost wondering if Toby Butler and Drew Lalonde were willing to give up positions on the restart, thinking, hey, I'll have better tyres in the long run. And Brian Barnes right now may be driving a bit above his head, and it may hurt him if this race has a green flag feel for it for a little bit here.
Well, it looks like Josh Gardner posted in the text chat that he doesn't have enough talent and he's not going to risk ruining someone's race. So unfortunately for Josh Gardner, his day is going to probably be done. But with that being said, Brian Barnes is going to hold on to the lead for another couple laps here as Toby Butler tries to crack the shell and figure out how is he going to get around Brian Barnes without using too much of his tires. Again, we see Brian Barnes taking that very high exit into the tri-oval area and then come back across as they go into turn 1. So it looks like Brian Barnes will be favoring the inside lines through 1 and 2, a little bit different than what we discussed earlier, but it seems to be working for him as he still has the lead here on lap 25.
It seems he is sliding up every now and then, though, and if he slides up just a tiny bit, Toby Butler will try and make a move, or maybe not, because now Toby Butler's got Drew Lalonde all over him. But it looked like Drew Lalonde actually backed off on the front stretch that time, Brian. Maybe he was thinking, hey, let's let this battle for the lead sort out, and then I'll pick up the spoils once that's over with. Because Drew, I think, had the opportunity to go too wide if he so wanted in turn 1 last time.
Well, we need to keep in mind, Sam, that this is a 200-lap race, and as we saw in qualifying, Drew Lalonde was the fastest man on the track. So with that being said, I think right now he's just trying to keep the car clean so he doesn't waste his quick repairs, so that way he'll have them later on in the race. With that being said, we can see that he's getting a run out of turn 2 every lap, and it's just a matter of time before he takes the lead again. I think what he's going to do is wait for later on in the race and then let the pit strategy sort it out the best of his ability.
Toby Butler currently holds the fastest lap of a race at 23.609. We'll wait to see if he can improve on that lap time, if he can get sniff at the lead. He's certainly sticking his nose out there, waiting to see maybe if Brian will just slide up and give him the position. That's what's going to happen right now. Brian slides up, but he's not going to give him the position. He's going to make Toby fight for it, but I think it's all over, Brian. I think Toby's got this corner.
Yeah, I would agree. So it looks like Toby Butler has the lead now. Brian Barnes, is going to tuck in behind him in second place. And I don't know if you saw it, Sam, but it looked like Carl Burke had a little bit of trouble in the tri-oval. He went for quite the ride trying to get below Drew Lalonde, but he was able to hold on. So right now, as it stands, we have Toby Butler in the lead, Brian Barnes in second, Drew Lalonde in third, followed by Carl Burke in fourth, and William Fletcher in fifth. Sam?
And now all of a sudden, this is a race for second, because look at the gap. that Toby Butler has over Brian Barnes already. It's 0.4 of a second within a lap. Third place, Drew Lalonde here. If he wants to remain in close contact with Toby's rear bumper, he's got to get by Brian as quick as possible because he's got a faster track than Brian. And if the race ends up going green, and who knows, it could, he does not want to let Toby Butler run away from him.
With that being said, if he does happen to get away, the worst thing that can happen, as we saw, was a car sitting down low. Well, you do not want that yellow to come out. What you want to do is get your tires conserved until you can get out ahead of everybody. And from that point on, you want to take a conservative approach until they catch back up with you. This is the best way to stay in the lead and hold on to that lead. And they can all come crumbling down with the yellow flag. So hopefully everyone stays nice and clean as we come around on lap 32 of 200. And believe me, I think we have Joe Pete back in the booth. Joe, do you hear me?
Yep, I got you. Sorry about that. Had suddenly everything crashed on me, so I had to restart.
Well, we'll get you caught back up, Joe. We had Toby Butler take a lead over Brian Barnes. Drew Lalonde's in third. He's very conservative right now, but showing a lot of pace coming out of turn 2 under the backstretch. Sam, what were you about to add?
Yeah, about to give a little rundown up front and also a rundown at the back. Randy Webster was the driver that you saw letting the leaders by. He's had a bit of a rough start to the race, but he's still out there on track, running 1 lap down. If there's enough cautions, he'll be able to get wave arounds and lucky dogs, and I'm sure get back up on the lead lap. Joshua Gardner retired from the race 12 laps ago.
So it looks like Toby Butler is making good on that oval experience. It's not just the super speedways that he's talented at, but other ovals as well as he continues to lead the way. Interestingly, I do see Carl Burke has worked his way up into this top pack of 4, and these guys seem to be running very closely knit at the moment.
Yeah, but like we say, Toby Butler being able to run away from these leaders a little bit as Brian Barnes is holding Drew Lalonde up a little bit, I believe. And we really haven't talked a whole lot about Carl Burke, as now here Drew Lalonde gets a run. Now, what's going to be interesting, and Carl Burke almost makes it 3 wide and then thinks twice about it. What's going to be interesting if Drew Lalonde gets second is how are his tyres compared to Toby's? Is he going to be able to run them down, Joe?
Well, that's the million-dollar question today, and right now he doesn't seem to be able to do it as he's starting to lose quite a bit of a gap with Drew Lalonde right behind him. I think you're right earlier saying that Drew seems to be running a bit of a conservative race, although I do see a bit of damage on the right rear of that car, so that could be one of his quick repairs taken up right there if he didn't already accidentally take one at the last stop. And he's really pulling up right up on the rear bumper of Brian Barnes and then backs off into the corner. I think he's holding something in reserve.
You know, Joe, it's an interesting concept for Mr. Lalonde. I did notice earlier in the race when Toby made the pass on Brian Barnes that William also tried to dive underneath and was unable to do that. And then in the process of trying to recollect his car, he might have slid up and hit the wall. So that's where the wing damage came from. But, you know, even with the slight damage to his rear, he seems to be showing good pace, and he's holding on with very good grip. So I think he's just going to hold on and try to make it to the next yellow and then sort it out from there.
Well, right now he is under threat from Carl Burke, and he goes way up wide. In fact, he lets Carl through. So Carl Burke is up into 3rd, and Drew Lalonde down into 4th after starting on pole. So I wonder if his handling is struggling a bit after that contact with the wall. So maybe we've got it wrong. The other thing that I was going to say is that he could be considering...
Oh! Big moment from Carl Burke coming out of turn 4 there. He was able to hold on to it. Sorry, Joe, but I thought he was going for a ride into the grass.
That's all right.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Joe. Coming out of turn 4 into that tri-oval is very tricky. Basically, what happens is you go from a very intense banking to no banking at all, and that really throws the weight of the truck off. And that was a great example right there what I was talking about when I said going into the tri-oval, you better be well committed or you're going for a ride.
So Drew is still continuing to hold on to the back. Meanwhile, 2-second gap from Toby Butler back to Brian Barnes already. And there we saw Randy Webster going low. He is a lap down and just letting these guys on by. So Toby Butler stamping some authority very early on in this race, but this is the first we've seen of a longer stint from these guys after getting a very early caution. So what do these trucks tend to do on a longer stint, Sam? I mean, do the tires tend to wear out quite a bit, or do they change in handling? How do they feel?
Well, honestly, I've never done a truck race at Rockingham. I've done a cup race at Rockingham, so I can't speak precisely, but I can speak from a visual example right now, and that is that Jared Morgan, who restarted in the top spot and led about the first 2 or 3 laps after the restart, is now all the way down to 11th position. You can see a bit of damage on the right-hand side of his car, so maybe he's scraped the wall and that's affecting his handling a bit. But I think most of it is down to the tyres. Even 10 laps on his tyres, and he has fallen from 1st down to 11th, despite having a truck that I believe can run in about 8th place.
Well, that's what his qualifying was showing, having qualified about 9th. So, yeah, you're probably right here. It looks like these guys... Whoa, and Jared gets very loose coming out of 4, but holds onto it. So, he is struggling, and I think you're right. Fresh tires are going to be the call of the day when it comes to strategy.
Battle for second. They've finally gotten underneath of Brian Barnes. Carl Burke may be able to make it here. Drew Lalonde backs out. And Brian overshoots the turn, almost gets up into the wall. He's up in no man's land where there's no grip up there right now. But Drew Lalonde just playing it really conservative. He could have easily had third there.
Well, he knows there's a lot of race to go here as Brian takes a little bit of a look on the inside of Carl. And I heard a little bit of chatter there, and Carl was apologizing to Brian, interestingly, not something you usually hear on the oval side of things. And I guess some good friendly driving going on between them, but Brian does not seem fazed from what I can hear over the radio chatter. You're right about Drew Lalonde. I was going to say that there's just so much race to go. He knows that cautions are likely to come later on. And if he does have the pace, then he could probably run down these guys up ahead of him, as now he looks on the inside of Brian Barnes and gets the job done cleanly.
Yeah, very interesting move. Brian Barnes, I'm wondering if he was too hard on his tires too soon. Joe, you asked earlier, what's the truck like when you're on a longer stint like this? Well, we've gone roughly 30 laps since the last yellow. If I remember right, we ended around lap 12. So these guys have got to be thinking, my tires are starting to lose all the grip, and once the fuel starts burning off, we're going to get light. This is going to be when we see the yellows come out. I believe the truck gets very loose when you have no fuel weight and your tires are starting to lose their grip, Joe.
Interestingly, Brian Pager also got by Barnes, and he is now up into 4th. He's sitting 5th in the championship, so this is a good thing for him to continue to make up positions here. And we've got another lapped car. That is Randy Webster that they are streaming on by once again. But just up ahead of these guys, Carl Burke still has 4.5 seconds between himself and Toby Butler, who is streaming away from this pack. In fact, that is if you look at that visual gap, if we can get a wide shot of these guys, he is just miles away from everybody at this point.
And we're coming up on the quarter distance here, Joe, 50 laps in, and now obviously the indicator of how far these trucks can go on fuel will be when Jared Morgan comes into the pits, because he has 10 laps less fuel than everyone else. And green flag pit stops. This is not the easiest of pit roads to get on, just because of the way the banking changes when you comes off of turn 4, and also it's a very slow pit road, 40 miles an hour. So you're really going to have to get your truck wound up. Green flag pit stops, if we see them, could certainly play a big role in this race.
Well, I imagine so, especially if we get interrupted by a caution somewhere in there. Those guys are absolutely going to be disadvantaged if the guys either wait too late or whatever happens in terms of maybe someone's heading into the pit lane right when the caution comes out, because if you can't back out, then you get sent to the back of the line no matter what, with a penalty by entering a closed pit. So that's something else to be wary of. Still coming up across more traffic, that's Mike Willett that is getting lapped now by some of the leaders as Carl Burke works his way past him. So let's get a feel for what is going on with fuel. Like you said, we're about 52 laps in, and Mike Willett.
Yeah, he slammed it in the wall, and the rest of the field did a good job to get around him, Joe.
Very heads-up driving by everybody. We're going to the replay on that. And it looks like, I'm assuming we've gotten our replay sorted out at this point. Mike Willett just driving that high line to stay out of people's way and did not anticipate the grip going away. And there he slaps into the wall. So bad day going very worse for Mike Willett right now.
Well, Joe, while we're trying to see if we can get the replay sorted, I just want to mention that typically the trucks in the C-Class race do around 35 to 45 laps, give or take, depending on the length of the track. Now, typically, you can do those laps without taking fuel when you go in for tires. So I'm guessing our window is going to be just a little bit longer than that. Somewhere around 50 to 60 laps will probably be our window for fuel. Now, with that being said, I think it's going to be even shorter for the tires. I think the tires here, ideally, you would want to get those changed before 40 laps, because I think if you go anywhere beyond 40 laps, that's when you're starting to gamble a little bit, and you're starting to risk maybe seeing what happened to Mr. Willett when you think that you have the grip there, but then you find out you really don't, and that's when you can put yourself into trouble.
And I saw someone heading out of the pits, and that is Randy Webster. So he is one of the guys that is a few laps down. I guess he is taking a stop because it's not really hurting him to get fresh tires on under green. Everybody else, however, still electing to stay out, and we're getting word that there is a battle between Worthington and Morgan. Let's see if we can hop over to that.
Right now, it looks like Jared Morgan's trying to close that gap up over there on Skip Worthington. As we see another car jump down below them, that's the number 8 of Toby Butler. So he's starting to cycle through the lap car traffic as well, further on in the pack where the battles are still going. So that's going to put a little wrench in Jared's plans. I guess right now, the name of the game is survival, because every time someone looks like they're getting a run, these front runners are coming through and breaking it back up again, Joe. So it's kind of like what we see in road racing in a way.
Now, remember, Jared Morgan was the guy that did not pit last time around. He was in first. So the leader, Toby Butler, in about 50 laps or so, has put him a lap down already. So I don't know how much of that you can attribute to pace and how much you can attribute to the tires. But boy, is he dropping like a rock.
That's right, Joe. And driving like a rock indeed. Remember, he had a really good start, and he had the already temporarily warmed down tires, so he had a great start. He started to slip a little bit sooner than he probably wanted to, and that's when he started falling. Now, somewhere along the lines, he picked up some rear wing damage, as you can see, and that's really, I think, ultimately what's going to really hurt him, that lack of the loss of rear grip coming through turns 2 and into the tri-oval. That seems to be where he's losing the most time. So unfortunately for him, until he can go get that fixed, I don't see him making the comeback anytime soon, Joe.
Probably not. Well, let's check out Brian Barnes and Brian Pager, though, the battle of the Bryans, because they are each on top of each other, and that is for fourth and fifth between these two guys right now. Not really close enough, but Barnes is very much putting the pressure on Pager, Sam.
He is indeed, and they're coming through turns 3 and 4 right now, but you've got to consider that these trucks are not handling at their optimal right now, so I'm pretty sure that they don't really want to get side by side. Really, the best opportunity, I think, if I was Brian Barnes at trying to pass Brian Pager, would be coming into the pits. Just my 2 cents on Jared Morgan, Joe. Honestly, I know he was running 8th and 9th in practice, but I don't think he's too far off the pace, because the field has really spread out, and even if he was running in 9th position, well, the driver in 9th right now, the driver who actually started from pit road and went a lap down early and is currently on the lead lap, although he's about to lose that to Toby Butler here, is Vernon Markheim. So even if Jared Morgan was running in 9th place right now, he would be risking going a lap down. So he's not too far out of it.
Yeah, and we saw Vernon go a lap down earlier when he started from pit lane, so he obviously is not going as fast as some of these leaders by a significant margin, being relapped once again. In fact, just ahead of him, Mark Redeker also getting ready to go a lap down. But you have to give credit to some of these lapped cars, because everybody's being really good and playing very patient and polite, and getting out of these leaders' way as they charge on through.
I'm going back and just confirming that Jared Morgan has not pit yet, because we are about 70 laps into the race, and yeah, he has not made a pit stop. So certainly he should be coming in soon. And like I say, when he does, that'll forewarn us that, hey, the rest of the drivers will be coming in within about 10 laps. And really, the drivers in front of Jared Morgan, such as Skip Worthington and Vernon Markheim, as soon as they see Jared coming to the pits, they've got to react to that, because they've got to get on those new tyres too. There is about 1 second difference, it looks like, between what these drivers can run on fresh tyres and what they're running now.
Well, remember what we were asking about Drew Lalonde, if he's got the pace or what. He is already up on the back of Carl Burke, worked himself up into third, and he is looking at second right now. So I think Drew Lalonde really was playing possum back there for a while, just patiently waiting for things to play itself out and for more of this race to go on by. I mean, we're still just over a quarter into things at 68 laps into this race, but right now Drew Lalonde seems to be able to be very much in control of what kind of pace he's running around this track.
Yeah, right now, I totally agree, Joe. Drew Lalonde is looking amazing. And the nice thing about these oval racing cars is they're made out of the heavy metal, so they can take quite the beating. Maybe we got the wrong idea of that wing being damaged like it is, slowing him down. But I'm starting to think maybe he was just saving his tires, knowing that, hey, this is a 200-lap race. There's no point getting into a tough early on and ruining my chances. Even with the quick repair, if you have to take a 2-minute tow, that's a couple laps that you might not be able to make up. So by what he's doing right now, running quickly behind Carl Berg but not making a move to pass him, that's going to help him in the long run, because not only is he saving fuel in the draft, but he's also kind of sizing up his competition. And if we get another yellow anytime soon, he might be able to pounce once he gets that damage repaired, Joe.
I have to ask, though, with these cars, having some aero that they need to get their grip through the turns, is he getting a lot of washout from Carl probably, and is that going to damage his tires trying to follow behind him?
Yeah, it really depends on your entry to the corner. Typically in NASCAR, people like to jump off the brakes early, or excuse me, the accelerator early and roll their way through the corners. Other people like to get in very, very deep and brake. So if he's feeling a lot of the draft effects and he's rubbing his tires up and you hearing the squeaky sound that drivers cringe when they hear, maybe he's gonna back off just a little bit more. But if he can handle the car the way it is and not rub off too much of his speed and save his tires, he might be in a good position, Joe, to take over second place and then make a run for the lead later on.
And it sounds like we've got a battle forming for 10th here. We've got Skip Worthington, Jared Morgan, and Stephen Paulson all together, but they've got some of the leaders coming on through, and that's going to cause Stephen Paulson to really lose ground on those guys up ahead of him. And I saw someone heading into pit lane. Did anybody catch that?
Unfortunately, Joe, I did not, but right now I'm just going to say Skip Worthington being a lap down, he's having quite the consistent race. Unfortunately, the pace isn't there, but he is looking very good nonetheless as he comes around in lap 72.
I think we're getting green flag stops starting now as we are 72 laps in, and Mark Rediker, has headed into the pits, and he is getting fresh tires at the moment, probably getting a splash of fuel, and we'll see where he comes out. If we get a caution right now, this is going to work out really good for him. Now he's able to come back out.
I'm gonna disagree with you that Joe a bit. If you lose a couple of laps pitting under caution while they're pitting under green while the other cars are still on track, you could lose out big. Now Jared Morgan is coming in the pits, but I don't know if that is his fuel window, because in the last 2 laps he had gotten in the wall in turns 1 and 2, so he may just be coming in for repairs and to finally get some fresh rub on that truck for the first time since the start of a race.
Not to jump in over the top of you, Joe, but I don't know if anyone noticed that the 42 of Randy Webster looks like he was coming down the pit road and then might have missed his entryway. I didn't know if he was getting out of the way for the leaders or if he was trying to make a quick dive into pit road, but unfortunately he missed it and it has to take that narrow pavement on the other side of the pit wall and try again in the next lap around. That's really going to hurt him in the time.
Well, he's 7 laps down right now, so he may have just been letting the leaders by.
A distinct possibility, and in fact, I think he's 10 laps down now, so he doesn't have too much to worry about there. I think he's just running laps to see what he can gain, because with such a race length, there's really no reason to quit this early on. He still could have people drop out and still slip on by them if their car is too damaged to continue on. Although that will be made a little bit more difficult, Sam, with 2 quick repairs to go.
I'm wondering if we could get a camera on Jared Morgan right now, because he just came out of a pit, and let's see how much quicker these new tyres make him than Steve Paulison, the car in front of him. Well, actually, he drifted up the track there, completely missed the apex of a turn. And actually, look at Stephen Paulison battling for position there with Skip Worthington. Nice pass there. But yeah, Jared Morgan should be able to run these two drivers down and just pass them in a second like he did there because of those new tyres. And Brian Barnes sees that in the number 4 truck, and he comes into the pits to get some fresh rubber on his Silverado.
So now we're starting to get a feel for what these guys are like comparatively from old tires to new tires as Jared Morgan tries to make his way back up through the field after taking that stop. We still haven't seen the leaders come in, though. These guys seem to be waiting to go as long as they could. Obviously, they can go about 10 laps longer than some of these guys who have pitted like Jared Morgan and such. So strategy's starting to rear its head and make a difference in who is running where and how it's all going to play out. We are gonna how about we hop to a break just for a bit as some of these guys start to put their pit stops in. We've had quite a long green run here, and see if we can give our vocal cords just a rest for a moment and try to reorganize, figure out who's doing what and who's where. We'll be back after a moment. Welcome back to Rockingham Speedway. We are in the midst of the Northwest Majors 200-mile race, or I'm sorry, 200-lap race here at Rockingham. And right now, Toby Butler is schooling everybody and then some, leading the way with a 14-second lead. Carl Burke is sitting in second. Drew Lalonde is in third, with Brian Pager in fourth. And fifth is Ray Fourier. And Drew Lalonde actually was getting passed by Jared Morgan. So there's that fresh tires again that we were talking about. And for those just joining us, we have only had one caution so far today, Sam.
Yes, we have. We've had a couple of close calls, but now it looks like green flag stops the starting as Vernon Markheim and Carl Burke come into the pits. Now, the only leader that came into the pits before this all started was Brian Barnes. Now, I am very curious to see if he's going to be able to leapfrog a couple of cars through this because of having those extra laps and those new tires.
Well, right now, Brian Barnes is showing down 2 laps. I don't know if something happened that I missed, but
he pit.
Oh, right. Excuse me. That's right. He pitted during the break, and he just he had such a good race today. I'm kind of bummed to see him get caught up in the battles for second, third, and fourth place because that has really cost him a lot of time. And I think if he was in a situation more like Toby Butler's in, he'd be running a lot closer to the front than he was at the time.
Speaking of Toby Butler, I'm wondering if we can get an onboard with him to kind of get a feel for what it's like around here. I'm sorry, I take that back because commentators curse. Toby Butler's heading into the pits now.
And
you got my hopes up.
Did you see how much later he was on the brakes as Stephen Paulison there? He basically just gained 5 seconds over Stephen, well, maybe not 5, but a bunch of seconds over Stephen Paulison just by braking late on pit road. He really must have been practicing that, and that could help him win him this race.
This is going to come back to what you were talking about, Brian Barnes, earlier. Let's see where he comes out in relation to him as Brian is still out there. Toby is into his spot and getting fuel and tires. Where is Brian Barnes at the moment? He is still scored as a lap down.
He's on the backstretch right now, but I honestly think Brian Barnes isn't going to be close enough to battle Toby Butler for the lead. He was running 5th place before this all started. He may be able to leapfrog Brian Pager for 4th.
Toby Butler is back now onto the backstretch, getting up to speed. Pager is actually in the pits himself, and Barnes, it looks like, is about half a lap back from Toby Butler still, so didn't seem to gain a whole too much on him at the moment.
On Brian Pager he did. Brian Pager exiting pits right now in the middle of a backstretch, and Brian Barnes has leapfrogged Carl Burke and Brian Pager during that cycle, and so I would believe that he may have leapfrogged Drew Lalonde as well. Brian Barnes may end up coming out in 2nd position, I think, Joe.
So very savvy strategic move from Brian Pager there, from Brian Barnes rather, as things cycle their way through. Things are very mixed up. There was all but 3 cars marked a lap down. So now we've got some guys coming back to the lead lap as it's starting to play itself out. Drew Lalonde has served his pit, so now Toby Butler is effectively in the lead. Woo! Toby Butler, however, had a very close moment with Jared Morgan there for a moment as he was trying to lap him, and now is going to wait just a little bit, tries to head up the inside, and now Jared Morgan is going to let him on by.
Well, Joe, at the last update, it looks like Brian Barnes is about 13 seconds back still. So, unfortunately, like you said, the pits didn't really help him a whole lot. But now that we have clean tires and we've seen everybody kind of cycle through and get past the lap traffic, we have a chance now to just run some raw, hot laps and see what these guys are really made of.
In fact, maybe now is the good time to hop on board our leader and see what exactly it's like on here. So let's see. Now we're on board with Toby Butler heading down the front stretch. Now, Brian, since you've had the experience in one of these trucks around the rock, why don't you talk us a little bit through this lap and what they're experiencing?
Right now, if I have the right camera feed, we're on the backstretch as we come in turn 3 and we take an early entry. Now you're going to see that it's really typical to take this yellow line all the way around. That way you can prepare for a mid to high exit here as we see going into the tri-oval. Now right there where that little bump was where people go sideways a lot. Same thing with turn 1. It's very easy to hit that bump right there as you see the dip and how we bounce back around again. And you want to get kind of a high entry and then a low exit out of turns 1 and 2. And that it basically is the lap here. It's very short. It goes by, if you blink, you miss it. But since the track is so old and bumpy and it's such a unique shape, it's very easy to get it wrong and spin your truck here, Joe.
Said like a pro. I don't think I could have spoke that fast about this sort of lap, so well done around there. Now, Sam, it sounds like you got some good information on the progress that Brian Barnes is doing, and I'd assume he is actually on a barn burner today.
Yeah, he came in, when that pit stop cycle started, he was in 5th place. He pit before the rest of the truck, so he was able to run laps on his newer tyres and leapfrog his way from 5th all the way up to 2nd during that cycle. Now, of course, the problem is he has older tyres than the rest of the trucks, and that's why you just see right there Cole Burke taking 2nd place from him. But this could still play out for Brian. If a caution comes out within the next 20 or so laps, everyone's going to come back down pit road and he may be running in 3rd position. And there's only 4 cars left on the lead lap.
Yeah, in fact, it looks like Drew Lalonde is starting to pull up behind Brian Barnes. He's still got the lap car of Lawrence Danton between them, but he's been reeling him in as well. So it's an interesting game of give and take as far as these tires and how they wear out and what your strategic call needs to be. I am really shocked, guys, that we are 106 laps in and we have had a single caution, and I thought I heard someone just hit the wall.
Randy Webster coming out of turn 2. I mean, he's had a bad race today, but he pounded that wall off of turn 2 last lap, and it was amazing that he didn't wreck that truck on the backstretch.
And we are pulling up the replay. Let's see if we can get Randy Webster. There you can see coming into turns 1 and 2, sliding up the hill and sliding and woohoo! That was a huge thwack. So yeah, bad day for Randy in that yellow and blue Cheerios car.
Yeah, Joe, that's kind of what I was saying in a pre-race notes, that this track is a lot like Darlington is. When you're coming out of turn 2, that wall just sneaks right up on you, and if you lose traction or you've already hit that wall before in the race, your truck kind of loses the grip, and there's no way to avoid that wall. It comes a lot faster than you think, and if you don't plan ahead of time, it's really easy to hit it. And unfortunately for Randy Webster, that's what we just saw there.
And Sam, it looks like Drew absolutely did make good of those new tires.
Yeah, Brian Barnes, like we say, his strategy worked, but now he has pretty much the oldest tyres on the circuit. Still, it's playing out so far. He came into the pit cycle in 5th. He is still in 4th, so it's still an advantage. And he has 8 seconds above Brian Pager right now. But unfortunately for him, Brian Pager is catching him down at a few to several tenths a lap.
And speaking of the gap, 16 seconds between Toby Butler, our leader, and Carl Burke sitting in 2nd. Toby has really been running away with things, and I think you're right as far as in terms of skill level. I mean, Toby is just making these guys look a little foolish.
Yeah, you know, the one thing I've noticed about old drivers, and especially in the trucks, is you got 2 types of drivers. You got truck drivers that are really good at short tracks, like Martinsville and Bristol, and then you got guys like Toby that favor tracks like this in Charlotte, where it's a little bit longer, but it's not typically a super speedway where you can just mash the gas all the way around. So everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. I'm curious to see if Toby dominates all season long throughout the ovals later on as we go through the season, Joe.
So I am working my way through the field here to see if we've got a battle somewhere along the lines as guys get themselves spread out. Everybody's really kind of got their own little piece of track besides trying to work themselves through traffic. So not really a whole lot going on as far as battles go.
I want to give a shout out to Vernon Margheim. We saw him start from pit road to avoid any kind of early incident, and I don't know if he's done it through pit strategy or what, as he closes up real quick on the back of lap car Skip Worthington there, but he is currently running in 6th position after starting from pit road, so credit to him, because I believe he only qualified about 14th.
And you saw on your screen, I apologize, I was proven completely wrong as Mark Redeker put a move on Ray Fernier, and that was 4 position between 7th and 8th. Vernon Margheim, who we were talking about and watching on the screen at the moment, that is currently 6th position, who is trying to run down Brian Pager, who is quite a ways ahead, however.
Yeah, and you know, Pager's had such a great race, and and I believe he might have been caught out in a few bad situations because, excuse me as my phone goes off, my apologies. Um, Anyways, Brian Pager, he's really impressed me with his consistency. I just think that he's not had the cards tonight, as it just seems like he can't get a break anywhere on the track.
I want to hop over to Carl Burke and Drew Lalonde as Carl got held up by lap traffic significantly, and now Drew Lalonde is all over the back of that yellow and green machine.
He is, and we see Randy Webster get loose in the background there again, almost spin out the second caution of the race, but that didn't happen. But yeah, Drew Lalonde has ran Carl Burke down, but we've seen Drew all race just be playing way too conservative, I think, which would make sense if you were in a caution-filled race, but considering how green this race has gone, I really think he needs to make a move on Carl Burke and try and run Toby Butler down in case Toby does make a mistake like missing pit entry or something. That 16-second lead could always disappear at a tricky track such as this.
Yeah, we're currently sitting on board with Lalonde as he tries to run down Burke, closing in just a little bit around 3 and 4 here, but he seems to, every time he gets just a little bit close, it seems like he drops back. I wonder if the washout from that car in front is making it very difficult for him to get as close as he wants, as now he really closes in, gets right under that rear bumper, and he takes just a little bit of a look, but his momentum was ruined there, Brian, and he's taking a look once again. In fact, now he's going to actually go for it, and it looks like it's going to be a clean move before the corner is even over.
Yeah, I was looking at the onboard footage as you mentioned that they were on board with Lalonde, and it looked like Carl Burke had just a little bit of a bobble going over that bump I mentioned earlier into turn 1. When you scrub up a lot of speed there, that's really going to hurt you going down the back stretch because you don't have the momentum coming out of turn 2, which is kind of a daredevil approach as it is, and it opened the door for Drew Lalonde nicely. Great pass from Drew. And
keep in mind that Drew started on pole. Now that he's in second, he's a little bit closer back to where he started. But the one that I'm watching that I find really interesting, just real quick, William Fletcher, he started in second. He started in the front row, and he is currently sitting ninth, 2 laps down. I'm not sure, did he run into trouble somewhere along the ways? Because he's definitely not running according to his 1-lap pace that what it would imply.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people hit the wall, so I'm starting to suspect maybe earlier on he might have tagged the wall or got caught up behind someone else that did, which ultimately would have slowed him down. He's been running some good times from what I saw in practice. I'm actually kind of confused myself why he's so far back after having such a strong start in the first 15 laps of the race, Joe.
So as now that Drew Lalonde has gotten past and into second and is not really being challenged as Carl Burke has dropped back just a little bit, we need to kind of watch the times. It's still about the same as it was before between Drew and Toby, our leader. So I don't think he's quite running Toby down at this point, Sam. Let's see what it is this time across the line, if he's able to shave just a few tenths or so off of that lead. It looks like no, he's dropping a few hundredths, so they're running very similar pace, and I think it's going to take either a yellow or some trouble for Toby for this gap to close.
Yeah, but the thing is he can run comparable times with him, and that means that if a caution comes out, we could certainly still have a race, despite the fact that under green flag conditions, Toby Butler has just been able to run away with this race just by the way it's gone. Now, Jared Morgan is in the pits. His truck does not have damage, and also he pitted not too long ago, so this can't be for fuel. This probably isn't for tires. It's not for damage. I have a feeling he is filling up to go the distance, thinking, hey, if I run on these new tires now, I can pick off 1 or 2 spots, because when Brian Barnes did that during the first green flag pit cycle, he was able to move his way up from 5th to 4th, which he currently holds down right now. So Jared Morgan may be thinking, hey, I can make it to the end now. Let's see if anyone else plays the same strategy card here.
Jared is now back onto the backstretch trying to get himself up to speed, and he is going to work his way back up into this traffic as the car of William Fletcher screams on by now into the 3rd turn. So let's see how Jared Morgan's strategy plays out as the laps start to tick by, and especially if once everybody cycles through their pit stops, if maybe he can garner something if a caution comes out. So let's go through the standings real quick. Toby Butler is still sitting in the lead with a 18-second gap back to Drew Lalonde in second, who is currently lapping the car of Vernon Margheim. Meanwhile, in third, not far back, we've got Carl Burke just holding on the back of that white and blue car. Then, a little ways back, it's Brian Barnes in fourth. Then in fifth, we have Brian Pager. In sixth is Vernon Margheim, and in seventh is Ray Fournier. Then eighth is Mark Redeker. Ninth is William Fletcher. 10th is Stephen Paulison. 11th is Skip Worthington. 12th is Lawrence Danton. Then Jared Morgan is sitting 13th. Mike Willett 14th. Randy Webster is 16th. And Josh Gardner is a DNF out of the race. So that is where we are looking at right now.
And off goes the car on the front stretch. It's Toby Butler. It's the leader. He's gets a bit of wheel spin, exit in turn 4, runs through the grass, does a bit of rallycross, a bit of lawn mowing down there, and he, let's see, I don't think he lost any time. He may have gained some over Drew Lalonde.
Ooh, he was awful close to that wall we saw on the replay and absolutely screaming into turn 1, and thankfully was able to get it slowed down before he hit the banking and headed up towards the wall. But Toby Butler, whew, that was a hell of a ride for him. He's still got a ways back to Drew Lalonde, thankfully, so I don't think he lost too much time. We're going to see this time by the line where it is Drew. He got about 4 seconds off of him, so obviously Toby can't make many more mistakes like that. Hairy moment, but thank goodness that he had that gap, or else that would have been possibly his lead thrown away.
Joe, I just want to jump in real quick. That right there tells me that Toby Butler is a veteran driver, and he definitely knows what he's doing out here. Most drivers, when they get spun around like that, either panic and give it too much gas, or they slam on the brakes and bleed off all their speed. Technically, if you're in a situation such as this, the best thing to do is get the straightest line you can through the grass and then take your foot off of the gas. Just let the truck roll, keep your hands straight and as smooth as possible, and then find a nice spot once you get back on the pavement to either slow down or try to get back on the track and not bleed off too much speed into other traffic. What we saw from Toby was a very veteran move. I'm very impressed with that driving, and that is what is going to help win him a race, even with the loss in time that he had.
Well, unfortunately, even though the Butler didn't things nice and tidy, he is able to still hold on to the lead, at least for now. We've still got 66 laps to go. We're on lap 134 for these guys. So we are almost 3/4 of the way through the race, and Toby Butler still the guy to beat out of all these cars. Meanwhile, I'm trying to see if I can find a good battle going on, and I would note that Carl Burke has headed into the pits yet again.
Yep, could be playing that short stopping strategy, and this could certainly help him leapfrog Drew Lalonde for second place. In fact, Drew Lalonde's best strategy right now, I think, if he thinks this race is going to have a green flag feel to it, and you can correct me if you disagree, Brian, but I think Drew should capitalize on this and come in the pits too to stop Carl Burke from leapfrogging him.
No, I definitely agree. If your closest competition's going in just slightly earlier or a little bit later, I would try to match him as much as possible, because you never know when the yellow's going to come out, and that might be a factor in whether or not he's going to be a lap ahead of you, or if he's going to get the lucky dog. You never know. So if your competition's going in, I would follow if I can. If not, I would definitely not gamble. It's too early in the race to go for the gamble angle right now.
We'll see. It's definitely something. I mean, things have been a bit unexpected. I mean, we kind of thought that the difficulties of these tracks and some of these guys not being as experienced in the trucks, that we might have a few cautions, but that has not been the case so far, commentators Kurtz notwithstanding. And we're hearing that Redeker is also in the pits. So coming in from 9th spot, Mark Redeker is now cycling through.
Yeah, Mike Willett I saw down there a little bit ago as well. So certainly some drivers playing this short pitting strategy, but I still don't see any more of the leaders in.
Obviously, those guys thinking that long runs are the way to go in these cars. And Brian Barnes has definitely been dropping back from Drew Lalonde ever since he was able to get by, although it was Carl Burke that we saw most recently him get by, who Carl has already cycled through his pit stop. In fact, I believe Carl is the highest one that we've seen. He was sitting in third before he came in, and he's right now in seventh, trying to run down Ray Fournier, who's yet to make his stop. So Carl is kind of the one to watch of these top guys, I think, to see how an early stop is going to play out.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but right now, sorry, Joe, I'm watching Toby Butler. He had a little bit of a bobble, too, so I'm starting to wonder if maybe he scrubbed off a little bit of his tire rubber or got a flat spot. I'm not really sure with the truck in the current build what exactly happens with the tires if you lock them up too much, but I do know that he did have another little bit of a moment. I'm thinking that bump in turn 3 is starting to get the best of him just a little bit.
It certainly seems so. I wonder how hard he's pushing that car, especially with the gap he's got, which he has continued to extend. He's already a second past where it was when he had his little bobble through the infield. So it's not like he really needs to hustle too hard. I mean, he's continuing to extend his lead. I'm wondering if this is something where if he's got a crew chief on the radio for him, that they need to kind of tell him to just ease up and run clean, consistent laps instead of trying to run fast laps right now.
Yeah, I totally agree, Joe. If I was his crew chief, I'd tell him to relax. There's a lot of traffic between him and the closest car out in Drew Lalonde, who's 15 seconds back. There's no reason to go for the gusto. If I was him, I'd be definitely trying to save my tires, anticipating a yellow that might come out some point before the end of the race. But we've had 2 very long stints now. That yellow might never come, and if that is the case, maybe he's thinking, I just need to get as much of a gap as I can and let God figure it out, because man, he's running as hard as I've ever seen all throughout this race, and it's definitely showing. It seems like he's lost just a tiny bit of pace. That car's bouncing a little bit coming through 3 and 4. I don't think he's easing up any, Joe. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Well, just like the drivers getting tired on these long stints, our vocal cords start to get tired after a while. And I'm sorry, we're not going to take a break. We do have a battle between Carl Burke and Ray Fournier, but that seems to have died down already as Burke has sliced his way past on those fresher tires, and Ray Fournier is moved down to 7th.
Yeah, I really think Drew Lalonde is playing a bad strategy call here.
Welcome back, and you are looking at Mike Willett, who is I'm sorry, not Mike Willett, Randy Webster, who kicked off that last caution, which we are going to come back from, and boy, did it shuffle things up and put some guys at a disadvantage, as I'm seeing a bit of confusion up front here, though, for these leaders between, who was that trying to slot in there? I guess that was Brian Pager, who was trying to get into a spot, but the pace car should peel off. There he goes. Brian Pager was the one who won out the most. He was in 5th before the stop as the green flag waves. Now he is in 3rd. Those top 3 guys are the ones that had not pitted yet. And right now, Toby Butler is the one they have to keep their eye on, Sam.
Yeah, I kept saying that these drivers should come in the pit. They should come in the pit because this race is going to stay green. It turned out to go under caution, commentator's curse, and now these 3 drivers that stayed out, Toby Butler, Drew Lalonde, and Brian Pager, are the big winners. Another big winner, although he's a lap down, is Vernon Markheim, running in 4th position.
Yeah, so he's got a lot of work to do to try and get anything more out of that. Still 4th is going to look good for him. Drew Lalonde, though, is the one I want to watch now that he is right up on the back of Toby. You mentioned it earlier.
Oh, wow! Carl Burke almost got turned into the wall by Brian Barnes in the battle for 5th on the backstretch there. And that all started when Mark Rediker got on the outside wall. They were very racy on the restart, going about 3 wide and into the wall. There goes Carl Burke now.
And Drew Lalonde, I just saw him slam the wall. I was just about to mention that he has a fresh car this time by, but no more, I guess. And that has allowed Brian Pager up into 2nd. And I think I mentioned before, Brian Pager is 5th in the championship overall. So this is what he needs to slot a few more positions up.
Yeah, typically, Joe, you hear things like yellow causes yellow. Well, I was wondering if we were about to see that because a lot of these guys went in and finally got a chance to recollect themselves to get new tires, and the ones that didn't were up in the front just ready to go. So you had like all these hungry drivers just looking for a spot in the track, and like we saw early in the race, the outside line had a little bit of a delay once again. So those are the type of things you don't want to have, but this little bit of time as we go on board with Brian Pager. Right now, Toby's looking strong, but Pager's really throwing down some very, very good laps now. So it makes you wonder if Toby's ever going to see that gap again, Joe.
I don't know, and he actually slides wide, and now we see Brian Pager slipping up on the inside, and this is going to be the first time he's led a lap. Brian Pager into the lead. This is working a dream this last stint for him.
Yeah, Brian Pager's been working very hard. He's definitely one of the biggest movers here in the race today. He had kind of a quiet start, but now we see him leading the race after the huge gap by Toby Butler was reduced to rubble after that last yellow. Right now, Brian Pager's looking very strong as we come back around, and now it looks like Drew Lalonde is also starting to get a little bit of a run, so hopefully, despite smacking the wall, his car isn't facing too much damages. Now he can go after Toby Butler, who looks on the inside of Brian Pager, Joe.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering where that pace from Butler has gone. I'm wondering if maybe since he is now on fresh tires that he kind of needs to let it get up to speed, get things worn in for him to really get into the rhythm. If his car is better in the middle and the end of the stint than the start.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, and like I was talking to Sam on the last break off the air, I think Toby's lead was a byproduct of everything that happened. He had a good run, he got out of traffic, and then everyone was battling so hard behind him that there was no one slowing him down. So now that everyone had a chance to get fresh tires and recollect themselves, I'm starting to wonder how much of Toby's lead was raw skill versus how much of it was everyone else was just tired and needed a break for just a few minutes to catch their breath.
Well, let's jump back to Brian Barnes and Vernon Markheim. That is for 5th and 4th between these two cars. That number 4 car trying to find a way past the 33. And he tried to stick his nose in 1 and 2 and just couldn't make it happen as Vernon was able to hold him off. But it's not over yet as he continues to put the pressure on.
Very, very solid race by Vernon Markheim. I don't think we've talked about him going backwards all race. He's been going forwards the entire time. Meanwhile, Brian Barnes running solidly in 5th position after Carl Burke has fallen back from putting it in the wall at the restart. And those 3 drivers that I just mentioned, Vernon Markheim, Brian Barnes and Carl Burke, they're the only 3 cars 1 lap down. So you've got 3 cars on the lead lap in the battle, and then you've got this battle for 4th and 5th, and then you've got Carl Burke in 6th.
Yeah, Carl Burke is definitely dropping from these guys at a fairly fast pace. So whatever contact that he had that we mentioned earlier, I think it's could have possibly hurt his car. And we got word that Brian Barnes is into the wall. I'm not sure if we could get a replay of that.
Well, it hasn't happened too much because he's still behind Vernon Markheim.
We got a challenge for the lead. Toby Butler goes on the inside. The 7 car, Brian Pager, goes up the wall just a little bit. He manages to hold on before making contact. Drew Lalonde also got a look on the inside, but the camera unfortunately panned before I can see what happens. Regardless, it looks like Toby Butler's going to take the lead back, and he is a hard charger going through turns 1 and 2 into the backstretch as Brian Pager takes second place, and Drew Lalonde once again follows in third.
And you just saw that pass on replay. And go ahead, Sam.
I think what you're seeing here is Toby Butler basically has a long run car. He has a bit of difficulty getting going on the restart, but then he comes to life. Meanwhile, there was a change for fourth while that was going on. Brian Barnes was able to get by Vernon Markheim.
I'm impressed that Barnes was able to get by because that was a fair hit into the wall. He left a lot of paint on there, and his car is not looking too good right now. So whatever he did, maybe it improved the handling. I don't know.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback real quick on what Samuel just said about Toby's car might be set up for the long haul. A lot of drivers set up their cars to be loose at the beginning and they get tightened up, and that's usually due to a lack of experience. But some drivers, maybe in Toby's case...
I'm sorry to cut in, but it looks like Drew Lalonde has put a move on Brian Pager, and Pager was up into the wall all the way at the entry, and his front fender is looking very bad. His right front very much bent in.
Yeah, that was not a very smart move, but luckily he was able to hold on, and despite the damage, it looks like he's not being slowed down too much, so maybe he'll be able to power through these last 30 or 40 laps as we come to the final quarter of the race, Joe. A lot of these guys, like I said earlier on, can handle a lot of damage in these trucks and still be fairly quick, and Brian Pager is definitely showing that he has a lot of skill on this track today, so maybe he can just leg one out and have a good finish nonetheless.
Now, what I'm curious about is this is the first time we've seen Drew Lalonde behind Toby Butler on tyres that weren't worn out due to him battling midfield. Now we're going to really see, I think, because Drew Lalonde is right on the tail end of Toby Butler's slipstream here, if Drew can hang with Toby or not.
Unfortunately, this time by it definitely wasn't, as he lost 2/10 back to Toby, and he was slipping back just a little bit at least. We'll see when he comes by what it's going to be next time. Brian Pager definitely dropping back as he is an entire second behind Drew Lalonde. I think that damage did not do his car any good. This time by at the line, Drew Lalonde cut a 10th out, so it's a bit of an ebb and flow thing going on with Drew. So it looks like it's like we were saying before, these two are just about evenly matched on pace.
Yeah, right now we're on board, or I was on board with Drew Lalonde. He's showing some very good pace, and like I said, he's running that low line pretty good, as I mentioned earlier. So it's kind of a shock to see that he can't really hold on with Toby Butler. And I just wanted to finish my point real quick, Joe, because we got cut off earlier. A lot of those drivers do their setups so that they get better as the race goes on. So maybe what we're going to see is Toby Butler burning out some of that race fuel, lightening up the truck, making it a little more looser at turn-in, and that might be where he got a lot of his pace from earlier on in the race, Joe.
And we were watching some battles going on in the backfield there between 10th, 11th, and 12th. Steve Paulison making up a position on Lawrence Dalton, though Lawrence is taking a look back onto the inside and isn't able to make it happen. But now Steven is going very high as he slides up the track, but he makes the high groove work and holds on.
And that green truck right behind him of Jared Morgan is in 13th place, so you would think that's full position, but that is not the case. He is actually a lap down of the cars in front of him, and that, of course, is because he tried to short pit under his second green flag pit stop, and that turned out to not be the desired strategy because of a caution. The reason these drivers are also close, Joe, is Skip Worthington. He's got a fast truck in that Worthington original, but you can just tell visually it's got damage on it. He's been involved in a few incidents today, and I think that could be holding these drivers up. We may even be seeing a bit of what we call in the road course series a trolley train going on here.
I was just thinking the same thing, and it's causing these guys to all battle amongst each other and instead of trying to work together, try and get past Skip. and it looks like though Mark Redeker is going to take a go at him down into turn 1, and he just gets chopped off. Not quite close enough to make it happen, but boy, did Steve Paulison have to go high to try and miss that car in front of him. Mark Redeker obviously holding him up, and now it looks like Paulison is going to get repassed by Danton, who is taking a look on the inside. Paulison all the way up into the high line. Is he going to be able to hold on around the outside? They're going to drag themselves all the way to turn 1. Who's going to have it?
I'll tell you.
Oh, and there's contact.
Yeah,
and Paulison up into the wall. I'm sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I was just about to say, this is not what Toby Butler wants to be seeing, because if a caution comes out here, and you see Jared Morgan get a piece of that too, if a caution comes out, that is really not going to work to Toby's advantage. And now it looks like that these drivers have finished playing bumper cars and spread out. Maybe they've escaped through the worst.
I just wanted to jump in real quick. It looked like the 58 car of Stephen Paulson maybe got a little bit of his rear bumper on the exit of turn 2 onto that wall. He had to slow down quite a bit to not hit it full on, and that's why he lost so much ground. Well, on the next lap around, coming out of the turn 2 exit, once again, he hit the wall even harder, and then he came down and got a little bit of Jared Morgan, and that's why Morgan had to dive down to the inside line. This is not a place you want to get wrong, especially when you're battling. Too wide as possible, but single filed is referred.
And this is all happening right in front of Toby Butler now,
who has extended his lead to 1.6 seconds over Drew Lalonde. So Toby's pace was for real. He's still pulling away that gap. I want to go back to that battle going on for 9th and 10th, though, because Mark Redeker still is trying to work his way past Skip Worthington. Isn't quite able to, but he is definitely holding on to the back of that car.
Mark Redeker, he looks very hungry. He definitely wants to get around Skip, and he's looking to do it at all costs. But right now, I think he's going to try and play it safe for a few more laps, because he can't afford to spend more time in the pits after already being down 3 laps. So I think right now he's going to ride it out for a few more laps and try to see if he can put some pressure on Skip and hopefully force some mistakes so he doesn't have to do it the old-fashioned way, the old-fashioned bump and run way.
We have 20 laps to go at this point, and we are looking back from Skip Worthington on Mark Redeker. Skip doing very nicely, smooth like butterscotch right now as he's just holding off that car behind him. Redeker, I keep noticing he's trying to square off those corners, trying to get a run, and he's doing a good job of it, just not quite getting enough to make that run work so far.
Yeah, right now, and it looks like Skip Worthington got a little bit of wall, and then it looked like Mark Redeker had to jump down and anticipating a spin, but they both hold on. That's going to cost Redeker just a little bit of time. But right now, Skip's going to power on. It looks like he bent the front right part of his truck, and the damage is minimum, but you never know what that did to his suspension, Joe.
Yeah, Redeker definitely smacked the wall, and then he did it a second time on the front stretch once again, and he gets very close and very loose coming out of 2. So he is very much struggling with that car after putting some damage on it.
Yeah, right now it looks like the 59 car's also having some trouble with that wall coming out of turn 2. That has been the trouble spot today, as we anticipated. It's been a very rough race for both Skip and Mark, but they're both powering on now as we come back around in the turns 1 and 2, and we'll see if it happens once again. These guys seem to be losing a little bit of grip, this time much more tighter as they come back down the backstretch into turn 3.
And right behind them is Toby Butler.
I was just going to mention that. We are on board with Butler, seeing how he deals with this lap traffic coming down the front stretch. Are these guys going to hop out of the way? They're in the midst of a battle. Although the leaders are not too terribly far apart, now they're getting out of the way as Redeker moves up high. And now he's coming up behind Worthington. Is Worthington going to pull the same move and let these leaders through? No, he holds low, drifts just a little bit high, and now Butler's going to try and make his move as he slips up the inside and out drags him down to the first corner, so it should not be a problem here on through for Butler.
A big mistake by Skip Worthington there. He gave up way too much ground by letting him behind the turn like that. Back to you, Brian.
I was just going to say, I don't think he was doing anything to block the leader, Toby Butler. Right there, that's a very hard area to go up on the top side of the track, and I think he was worried that maybe skipping the wall a few times, a few laps prior, might have hurt his grip a little bit, so he was waiting for a little bit safer part of the track, let the leaders through, that way he can get through without spinning or causing some more drama. That's definitely not necessary at this point in the race.
Well, I thought Redeker was pretty pretty well damaged, but he is all the way back on top of Skip Worthington, probably helped by the leaders trying to come through. But now he's got to let Lalonde through, who slips by on the inside, and it looks like he's also going to be able to get on by Worthington. Now he's going on the inside across the start-finish line. And now this battle can resume, and the battle is joined by Stephen Paulison. So all three of these guys all battling for position in the back of the pack.
Yeah,
right now, go ahead, Sam.
They're going to be going at it hammer and tons, because it's lap 188 right now, 12 laps left to go, but there are no green-white checkers in iRacing. If a caution comes out with 5 laps left to go, the race is over, so it could very well be over in about 7 laps. Mark Rediker trying to throw a block on Stephen Paulison going down into turn 1, and it's going to hurt him. He does not have a desired line going into turn 1. Steve Paulison able to go under, but Mark Rediker going to attempt the crossover, but it's not happening, Joe.
Didn't carry the momentum quite good enough, and definitely that block hurt him terribly as he is dropping back very quickly from Paulison, who is making work on Skip Worthington at the moment coming down into turn 1. Where has Paulison been in all of this? He's suddenly got the pace that he didn't before, as he is just scything through these guys.
Interesting battle nonetheless. As Stephen Paulison, he's looking on the inside of Skip now. I think Skip is just showing that it takes a lot more to intimidate him than these people are hoping. But this has been some very interesting and well-to-do racing here, and we only have, let's see, about 13 laps to go. So maybe we'll see a move. Hopefully we don't see it end under yellow like Sam mentioned, but this has been a great race nonetheless, as it looks like Paulison is going to go on the inside. He slips. He hits the wall hard. He's going to go sideways. Morgan just barely makes it through. I lost sight of him. What happened? Joe, did you catch what happened after the wall?
Yeah, Steve Paulison is able to continue on. He just got too loose out of that corner. You can see it on the replay now. And in trying to catch it, he overcorrected and took a huge chunk out of that wall. Just absolutely bit into it with all his teeth. And boy, he's going to have to take a trip to the dentist after that one.
Unfortunately for Paulison, it looked like he had a very good run coming out of turn 2, but that's kind of what happens if you don't get that smooth run out of there. It's really easy to turn the truck around, and like I said earlier on, the truck's very easy to spin. So unfortunately, he gambled and he bit it hard.
And Steve Paulison down pit road, but meanwhile, there's a battle going on for 7th place as well now between William Fletcher and Ray Fournier, which got a bit ugly a moment ago when William Fletcher went up in the walls. So it's something I'm keeping an eye on, Joe.
Yes, I've hopped over to there now, and Fournier is just a little bit back, so he's not able to do anything at the moment. Closing in at a huge rate, though, through the corner. So obviously he's got a little bit better car through mid-corner than Fletcher does. So... And we're getting word that, interesting little tip here, Ray Fournier is actually a taxi driver, and he is taxiing on by Fletcher and takes the position, moving himself up into 7th place now.
Yeah, it looked like the 28 car got just a little bit of the wall coming through, so that kind of helped Mr. Fournier's cause. But he's going to go on, Fletcher, excuse me, he's going to go on with minimum damage. Hopefully he can get his rhythm back and try back for that position, because he's had a consistent race throughout, and that little bump is not going to help his cause any.
Meanwhile, Stephen Paulison has returned to the circuit with a very badly damaged car. I hope he doesn't spin out right here, Joe, because if he does, if that brings out the caution, it's going to be Toby's race. And honestly, I think it's Toby's race anyway. He's got a 3-second lead. He can really calm down now and just coast it home these final 5 laps.
Yes, we are going to tick off lap 196, and we are now into 197, so... there is getting to be fewer and fewer opportunities for anything to happen to help out Drew Lalonde or Brian Pager, especially Brian Pager, who is a whole almost 10 seconds back from Toby Butler in this final stint of the race. We've ran 200 laps around here. It's been 200 very fast, very hard-fought laps for these guys. And now we're on to lap 198 for Toby Butler, so 2 laps to go.
Toby Butler, he's just run a very impressive race, and with the gap he is now, I don't see anything kind of going to stop him unless he makes a mistake and crashes on his own without bringing out a yellow flag. There's no way that anybody's going to be able to catch him at this point. So don't want to congratulate or jinx him too soon, but Toby had a great race, Joe, and it was very exciting to watch.
And my mistake, it is 2 to go this time by on lap 199. He's going to get the white flag next time through. Drew Lalonde a whole full 3 seconds back, with no threat to our leader. He's led I'm pretty sure he's led the most laps around this race, Toby Butler has, coming around 3 and 4, getting ready to take that white flag. Not a completely flawless race. He had quite the adventure through the infield, but now he's going to be able to take his final tour. All he's got to do is cruise to the finish.
Yeah, Toby Butler will have led 166 laps if he wins this race, and there's not a truck out there without scratch on it.
I'm not too shocked about that. Now through 3 and 4, Toby Butler goes, and you can tell he's eased up the pace just a little bit as Drew has closed in, but it's not enough as Toby Butler wins round 4 in the Northwest Majors. Well done to him. Drew Lalonde is going to come home second, and Brian Pager is going to get a very well-earned third to complete the podium.
And this is going to give Toby Butler a huge points lead.
So to answer the concern that you mentioned earlier, Sam, I don't think it's just the super speedways. I think Toby Butler knows his way around an oval.
Yeah, I mean, Brian said it. He really just showed them all up today. There's really not a whole lot more analysis we can do than that.
Definitely, and Toby is going to do a few donuts, I think, here. There he goes, down on the apron of, there you can see him now on the screen, spinning out and doing a little bit of celebration. We are going to hop to break, and then we will come back with the unofficial standings and hopefully some interviews. So stick around, we'll talk to the drivers, get their thoughts, and we'll see you in a moment. Welcome back to Rockingham after we just witnessed round 4 in the Northwest Majors where they drove 200 laps in the trucks, and in the end, Toby Butler came away with the win with an absolute dominant performance. Drew Lalonde came in second, Brian Pager finished third to round out the podium, then Brian Barnes in fourth, Carl Burke in fifth, sixth was Vernon Markheim, then seventh was Ray Fournier, William Fletcher came home eighth, Skip Worthington finished ninth, Mark Redeker completed the top 10, then Lauren Stanton in 11th, Jared Morgan in 12th, Stephen Paulison finished 13th, Mike Willett in 14th, Randy Webster 15th, and Joshua Gardner, who did not finish, came home in 16th. And those were our standings. We've got some people to talk to, so let's bring in Carl Burke. He was one of our front runners for some of it, but it started to go south towards the end. Carl, with the pit strategy, were you one of the guys that pitted before that final caution?
Yeah, I was just playing the angles there, trying to. I didn't think there'd be another yellow, so it kind of backfired on me. I just about caught the leader when the yellow came out, and it kind of did me in.
Yeah, it seemed like a number of guys also employed the same strategy and really got bit. It seemed like it was very tough to handle the car, especially in traffic, and try to keep it out of that wall. There was a number of guys that smacked the wall throughout the day. How was the handling for your car? Was it pretty loose, or what was your feeling throughout?
Oh, I was really good the whole race till that restart. That restart was just really a little disorderly, and I got into the wall a bit, and it threw my steering off.
Well, our next race in the series is going to be another oval track. Are you looking forward to that one?
Oh yes, sir. The ovals. I love the ovals. We got to get something to give Toby a run.
All right. Well, thanks for coming and talking to us, and good luck at Indianapolis.
All right, thanks, man.
Next up, I believe we have Brian Pager. And Brian, would you like to ask a few questions of Brian? Brian?
Sure. Hey, Brian. This is Brian Corwin over here. Do you hear me all right?
Yeah, Brian, I got you.
So, Brian, we noticed throughout the race, and especially the restarts, the outside lines seemed to be a little bit sluggish. Did that affect any of the traffic or any of the opening laps on those fresh tires at all?
Yeah, it certainly did. Usually I start on the outside, especially like Rockingham. I usually try to take my time going through the turn, make sure I hold my line. So that kind of slowed me down a little bit.
Speaking of setups and just overall pace, did you feel like you had any pace today, or was this one of those races you're just kind of looking to get as many points as possible?
Yeah, I had pretty good pace, had a good setup. It just got tight a little too early in the run. Then the setup with the tires would come back to me. But it just wasn't enough to keep up with Toby and Drew, and they would just drive off, and there was no way I was going to be able to catch up to them.
Well, Brian, sorry to cut you short. We have a few more interviews tonight in the pipeline. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Up next, we have our second place finisher. That was Drew Lalonde, and Sam is going to ask him a few questions.
Yes, Drew Lalonde finished second place here today. Drew, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, congratulations on second place. It looked like Toby Butler had a bit of an extra pace over there, but you could certainly hang with him in the short run. Were you hoping for a caution there towards the end?
Yeah, it sure would have been nice.
Yeah, I also noticed you were running in a couple of restarts around third or fourth place, and you were kind of just hanging back of the car in front, being cautious about making a move. Were you trying to save tyres, or really was that just the knowledge that it was a 200-lap race?
No, I really was trying to save my tires. They burn up pretty quick here, and they can make you tight in the center and then make you pretty loose off.
Yeah, well, certainly this is a big points day for you, and I believe this is the first time you've been in a Northwest Majors race. Is that correct?
No, I made the first race of the season, but this is only my second.
All right, well, we're going to see you more often. You're going to be trying to contend for the championship, because you certainly seem to have the knack of these oval tracks down.
Yes, sir. I hope to make more of them.
Yeah, well, congratulations on second today, and the pace we saw Toby having out there's no shame in finishing second to him, I'm sure.
Thank you.
All right, back to you two.
Yep, and we have one more driver to talk to. That is Jared Morgan. He was a bit off strategy today, and it didn't seem to work out. Jared, you started in 9th, and then you finished in 12th. Were you intentionally trying to go off strategy? Did you anticipate a lot of cautions and that helping you, or what was your call there?
You know, I kind of did expect more cautions than that. Honestly, I had no idea they were pitting until they actually went in. I was going to go in the lap after, but pit road closed up on me, so I was just stuck back there. I said, heck with it, I'll see what happens.
Yeah, we kind of wondered, and it looked like as soon as the restart came on the worn tires, it was very difficult to keep pace. Were you losing a lot of pace the longer a stint went on?
Slightly. More or less on the restart, I just got out of their way because this is the first time I've actually ran in the Northwest Majors, and it's the first time in about 3 or 4 years I've run a race. So I just wanted to get out of the way and just survive. That was the goal today.
Well, you did manage to do it at least by being able to run at the finish, but hopefully you will be able to do a little bit better. Are you going to show up at Indianapolis in a few weeks' time?
I will actually look into it. Depends on if I have the day off. I have a weird work schedule, so that'll be a big key in it.
All right. Well, we hope to see you again, and thanks for coming and talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, guys, it's been an interesting one. It's definitely been one that we did not expect, with only a few cautions and most of them not coming until very late in the race. Before we go, we want to thank a few people. We want to thank Mike Willett, the organizer of the Northwest Majors, for doing all he has to make this thing happen. Also, thanks to the software and hardware that we use at GSRC. That would be iRacing.com, XSplit, Twitch TV, Audio Technica, and AverMedia. Thanks to the team, Brian, Kevin, Sam, and also Richard Losper came out and spotted for us for a little bit during this race and helped out. If you'd like to find out more about the Global Sim Racing channel, you can find it at www.globalsimracingchannel.com, along with archived races and race highlights. We're also on Twitter at GSR Channel and Facebook at /Global Sim Racing Channel. A special thank you goes out to Eric Ekholm, who provides us with much of our music. You can find it not only here on GSRC, but in TV commercials, movie trailers, iTunes, and Spotify. If you like our music, tell Eric where you heard it at ericekholm.com. Additional thanks go out to Casey Lalonde, who provides us with music for our broadcast as well. You can find more of his music at caseylalonde.bandcamp.com. Our next race is going to be at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Indy 500 for the Northwest Majors. So going to be a very difficult, trying, and long race for these guys for that. However, the next broadcast that we're going to be doing is going to be the Enduro Pro Series at Mosport. That's Saturday, April 26th at 3:45 p.m. UTC. Then after that, we've got the GreenValleyLake.com MX5 World Tour at Brands Hatch for round 14. That's Saturday, April 26th at 7 p.m. UTC. Then on Sunday, it's the Gathering of Tweakers, Sebring 185. That's going to be a hell of a race. Sunday, April 27th at 6:30 p.m. UTC. Then following that, we've got the Week 13 Big Grid race for the SRF, the Spec Racer Ford. That'll take place at Watkins Glen for the first time for that series. That'll be Sunday, April 27th at 9:30 p.m. UTC. Then for the Piston Cup, it's back to the ovals we go at Pocono, Sunday, May 4th at 6:45 p.m. UTC. And finally, a little bit from now, we've got the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series at Lime Rock Park, the bull ring of a road course, Saturday, May 17th at 10:30 p.m. UTC. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and I'll see you on the track.